This is Dr. Mary Payton with All About STEM Radio. And as you know, I come to you every Wednesday from 6 to 7 p.m. here on the Blue Stream. And before I get started, I have to talk about my lovely and wonderful sponsors. My first sponsor is Botanical Institute, ran by Miss J.C. Newell. It is a biomedical technical institute that is opening in Bedford, and yes, we will be looked at, or have been looked at by TWC, and they're going to be an outstanding institution. So if you are looking to change into a medical STEM career, please contact Miss J.C. Newell. Email her at info@redwell-ed.org. And also my second sponsor is Cullen County Black Chamber of Commerce. They are having a supply chain entrepreneurship academy program starting June 17th through the 28th for your juniors and seniors, and it's going to be at UNT Frisco. Hey, summer is starting. I think all schools are out now, so you should have something for your lovely babies to do, your boys, your girls, your young teens and old teens. And so start looking for things like that. Start traveling with your kids. Check out Taylor STEM Adventures, which is my books page, and All About STEM Radio to look for travel tips, because you got to get out and do stuff with your kids, not just send your kids. But, ladies and gentlemen, I got to tell y'all something. I have the most perfect young man here today. I have Dr. Williams from the Botanical Research Institute here in Texas, or as we grew up knowing, the Botanical Gardens. He is the lead for the Green Revolution initiative at the Botanical Gardens, and so I am so excited about having him on the show. So, Dr. Williams,
hello.
Would you introduce yourself?
Glad to be here. Dr. Jared Williams from BRIT, the Botanical Research Institute of Texas, at the Fort Worth Botanic Gardens, and in my spare time, I'm a social impact cultivator trying to generate impacts for folks that are measurable and that measurably improve their lives. So I'm excited to be here.
I'm excited to have you. So before we get started with all of our conversation, because I asked a lot of questions and then I get to talking a little bit too much too, but that, when you're a Texan, that's what happens. But tell us a little bit about yourself. Where are you from? Where did you go to school? And to be such a young man, how did you get to the level of academia that you are?
Yeah, so I grew up in Fort Worth, Texas.
Really?
Yeah, I graduated from North Crowley High School. And, I played sports at North Crowley High. I played football, and upon graduating, I committed to go to the Fort Valley State University in Georgia. It's a historically black college and university, and it's a long ways away from home, right? And one of the unique opportunities that I had was to choose whether I wanted an athletic scholarship or an academic scholarship. And so my family and I, we decided to take the academic route so that we're not completely tied to football in case injuries happen. They do, right? And sometimes your scholarship is in jeopardy when you can't play. And so early on, I had a really good support system to help make, conscious decisions that little did I know had a huge impact, 10, 20 years down the road. And so went to Fort Valley State. Still didn't know anything about science, right?
You had to know something.
A little bit, but it wasn't my first interest. My perception of science at that time was doing definitions, because we didn't have necessarily all the resources to do some of the more robust labs that would make folks really interested in science, right? And so our first week of two-a-days at Fort Valley, I entered into training camp, and as a part of training camp, you have to each player has to meet with their academic advisor, and so the academic advisors will walk you around campus, trying to help you decide on what your major is going to be while playing football, as a full-time job. And I walked into a lab. It's a genetic engineering lab.
Oh,
and,
wow.
Yeah. And I saw tons of plants. I didn't know the species at that point in time, but I saw tons of plants that were under UV light glowing. And I later learned that we're able to extract genes from jellyfish,
Yep,
the
I
green
was gonna say
fluorescent
that.
protein,
I do
yeah,
that.
and insert it into plants to see if they can accept other modifications that aren't as
Yeah.
visible. And so at face value, right, a young 18, 17-year-old, a kid seeing a bunch of plants fluoresce bright green is really cool. And so I was like, I want to do this. Had no idea what was in store for me. And so from then on, I promised myself that, it's this idea of experience and exposure for kids that it's really important to have experiences that connect you to decision making. And if you don't have informed experiences, right, then it's hard to make a full comprehensive decision about what are your interests and what direction or path is best for you in life. So that kind of led me into the STEM world. Later, after I graduated from Fort Valley, went to TCU to study environmental science, and then from there went to University of North Texas, where I finished my doctorate in environmental science and science education. So all along the way, I took that formative experience, going into college of not only exploring like professional careers, but aligning that with passion to give back to kids and to the community in a way that helps increase and enhance experience and exposure, that helps grow the community in a meaningful way.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, see, some of our background parallel. I'm a Fort Worth grad
Yeah.
and a TCU grad.
Go Frogs.
So, Horned Frogs, yeah. But, being, going to Fort Valley, going to TCU, give me a little bit about your educational experience, especially in science, because we have so few males, or African American males, that actually will go the science route.
Sure. Yeah, so I have a unique perspective, being that I attended an historically black college, the University of HBCU. Then I attended a predominantly white private institution, and then attended a predominantly white public state institution like UNT that's 40,000 plus students. And so I got to see college at different scales in a sense, both in terms of population and in terms of like demographic makeups and resources, et cetera. And so one thing that was really foundational was going to an HBCU. The professors at HBCU are well renowned and get their doctorates from all over, some at HBCU, some at other institutions.
Yeah.
And one thing that I really appreciated was that professors at Fort Valley really put a chip on their students' shoulders, preparing them for, especially in STEM, for the world that may not yet demographically represent, people of color as rich as it does, other racial, ethnic backgrounds.
Yeah.
And so from then on, like having that identity in an institutional sense at HBCU, but also within my own family, having that self-identity and that self-value and that self-efficacy really allowed me to not only thrive in spaces where I may have been the only African-American male, but it also afforded me an opportunity to reach back and look back and say, well, what does equity look like? What's the kind of equity in STEM workforce that I want to see, and what can I do to reach back and to help other folks of all walks of life, achieve their dreams. So.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
And you know what? That is so important, because right now, a lot of people look at STEM and say, okay, science, technology, mathematics, and engineering. But they look at it as, oh, I want my kids in a coding class. I want my kids in a robotics class. I want my kids in a drone class. But then what you got to really, really, really think about also, plants, food, livestock, all of that, biology runs into STEM. And a lot of people are like, oh, that's STEM? Yeah. Growing plants, letting your kids know what that looks like. Or my mouth can't say it, meteorology, weather.
It's hard to say it 3 times in a row, too.
I'm having a hard time saying it one time. What does that actually look like?
Yeah.
A lot of people don't don't really see that
Yeah.
until they become adults and they start looking for things in the workforce.
Yeah.
And so
That's so true. And like you look at, the Bureau of Labor Statistics, and you look at like U.S. Census Bureau, and jobs are certainly moving to STEM-related skills. So just because it's not traditionally viewed as like the STEM, the building buildings and engineering, or the crunching numbers in a room in isolation for math,
Yep.
right? The world is, we're advancing technologically.
Yes, we are.
And STEM is, at least STEM-related skills are woven in a great majority of jobs across the U.S. And so it's so important to connect your kids with all different types of STEM. It doesn't have to be, chemistry or coding or drones. It can be as simple as taking your kids outdoors and letting them use that natural curiosity to explore. That's, the beginning of STEM is like critical thinking and asking the right questions. And those are the type of skills that, are going to be needed in the 21st century.
Yeah.
And it's invaluable to provide our kids with those type of experiences.
And it's using the technology that we have. I had a young man on my show last year. He was from the Gambia, and because I was doing the show from South Korea, and he was getting his master's in physics. His father had a farm, and he wanted to design some other type of watering system for his father's farm, to where you just because of the amount of acreage. And so he was looking at what was available that he could use to create that type of a system. And I know the systems are out there, but some of them are very costly, some of them are very large, and some of them they didn't have available. So he was looking for things that he could use, although he was looking at agriculture, but he was looking at how can he use the technology to better take care of the agriculture that they had. So I thought that was pretty neat.
That's so neat. And I think one of the like really fascinating things about the world of STEM is just this idea of connecting it back to your community.
Yeah.
Right? Taking what we learn in school, what we learn in life experiences, and then connecting it to, take care of the plants at home, or to grow our own food, or, just to appreciate nature in and of itself, and its role in supporting life systems. And so it's stories like that always like keep me up at night, trying to figure out ways to do things better at home in the yard, and and just find ways to continue to like explore and to get folks outside exploring. Yeah.
And that's so important, because so many of our kids don't even go outside anymore.
Yeah.
I mean, ethnicity has nothing to do with it.
Yeah.
But so many of our kids across the board, they sit in home and do, video games, cell phones, TV. All of that is a distraction.
Yeah. It's hard to compete with.
Yeah. And for me, it's hard to compete for me with nature. I love being outside.
Yeah.
So, but getting back to you, because we're not talking about me. This is your show.
It's our show now.
It's our show. All right. So when you graduated, what were some of the positions or things that you did between getting to Brit and then?
So I'm a workaholic.
Uh-oh.
So I'm always working like 6 different jobs. Even in school, like from undergrad through my doctorate, like I always had a series of jobs at the same time concurrently. And so I've stayed engaged in some kind of like skill or another. And so like in undergrad, I worked, and some students don't know the opportunities on campus to earn a little extra money. And so I'd work as a student tutor in the Academic Success Center at Fort Valley. I worked in the lab to get extra skills as a research assistant. All of that paid.
Yeah.
And then when I went to TCU, I worked as a teaching assistant. And so most folks don't know that when you go to grad school, if you're a teaching assistant or a research assistant, they pay your tuition. Most universities pay your tuition.
Yep, I was a research assistant.
And then
also,
they pay you to go. I was like, wait a minute, you're paying me to go to school? That's something I can do. And so we got a stipend for that. And then in addition to that, I found opportunities like, most students do to work part-time jobs here and there until, basically to pay rent every month. And so
Yeah.
the stipends are great, but they don't always cover all of your living expenses. And when I was at TCU during my master's, one of my professors introduced me to Brit, actually.
Okay.
And so I started out at Brit as a volunteer intern, unpaid, yeah, and just kept working 4 or 5 other part-time jobs, and then would go to Brit and help out where I can. And I worked on an initiative at the end of my TCU career when I went into UNT. And I worked with the Dallas Environmental Education Initiative. And so it's basically an initiative that's funded through the city of Dallas, but it's directed by a professor at UNT, Dr. Rudy Thompson.
Okay.
And basically the initiative is helping the city of Dallas educate the public about the importance of water conservation and waste diversion, to inform citizens on ways that they can conserve resources. And that's one of the city's major, levers of their strategic plan, to make sure that they have enough water supply for the demands as population grows in the city of Dallas. And so,
because this population is just exploding in the Metroplex.
Exactly. And so I've got a chance to work with several nonprofits, whether volunteer or for pay. I really value the value of experience.
Yes.
And so one thing that I've learned as, young as, I may be, is that, we can accelerate our experiences by utilizing the time that we have. And so, I could work one job linearly for 5 years, or I could volunteer and work wherever I can for 5 or 6 different companies, and exponentially increase my experiences to be more of a value to the community and to the companies that I partner with. And so that has been my experience to Brit. And then from there, they paid me a stipend to facilitate the program, Green Revolution. It wasn't called that, 7 years ago. It was just a pilot where we were really excited about engaging kids that traditionally didn't, traditionally weren't represented in the field of botany specifically.
Yes.
And then the pilot grew, and I was glad to be on the ground, the grassroots level, helping develop it. And from there, I just kept taking opportunities as they came, and found my way to youth education manager at some point. So, yeah.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, those of you who are just joining us, hey, Crystal, hey, Peggy, hey, Mishan, thank y'all for joining us today. Don't forget, I am being sponsored this month by the Collin County Black Chamber of Commerce. They are having their Supply Chain Entrepreneurship Academy program June 17th through the 28th at UNT Frisco, and by Brit Technical Institute, that has nothing to do with the Botanical Gardens. Brit Technical Institute, a biomedical and IT training institute that is opening up in Bedford. For more information, contact J.C. Newell at info@ridwell-ed.org. If you are just joining us, I have Dr. Jared Williams here today talking about his experience. He is from the Fort Worth Botanical Gardens, or the Botanical Research Institute of Texas. We from Fort Worth, we're very, very prideful of our organizations, and he leads the Green Revolution initiative there. So wait a minute, do I have questions here? Oh, yeah. Okay, I'm just looking at what some of our people are posting. Now, what is the Green Revolution Initiative?
So the Green Revolution Initiative, we call it GR sometimes for short. I know it's a lot of syllables. But GR started 7 years ago as a pilot program for 15 kids from the Morningside community.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so Morningside community geographically is located east of I-35 in Fort Worth.
I know Morningside well.
Yeah, and it's a really it has a rich demographic population,
Yes.
And there's some specific needs in the community that when we started, we wanted to really address. One of them being that in the Morningside community, there's a rich demographics of students or students that represent a rich demographic that's not traditionally represented in botany,
Right.
not traditionally represented at STEM. And so it was our institution's opportunity to basically develop, opportunities to inspire folks who are traditionally not included in those type of experiences with, the world of possibilities, in botany and in STEM. And so we're started by Britt, and Britt's major focus is really about global plant conservation and about educating the public on the role that plants have as life-sustaining
Yes.
species or, individuals, right? And so it's this idea that we could really connect kids to such a large mission of, how do we think about our environment from the standpoint of learning about it, then becoming stewards of it, and then serving it by teaching others about the role that plants and the environment have. And so it's a really natural fit for Britt. And so we're housed in what we call the GROW collaborative. So it's this collaborative that was formed fairly recently, and we kind of moved into it between Britt and the Fort Worth Botanic Gardens. And so if folks are wondering where our offices are, they're in the GROW offices at Britt. And so when we started as a pilot, we took 15 kids all over the place doing tons of field techniques in botany, just teaching them what is the basics of like how do you collect a plant and preserve it, how do you catalog it, etc. And then it evolved into a green revolution. And so 7 years later, we've expanded into 3 programs. We have what's called STEM University. It's a Saturday program for 3rd through 8th grade students. And it's really geared around exposing students to the wonders of STEM. Then we have STEM Society, which is our high school program, which is basically honors high school students for their scholarship and their service through the lens of STEM. And so they serve as mentors for our middle school students during the STEM University. They're required to have so many service hours in environmental STEM, and it's all about exposing them to new opportunities. And then lastly, we have our educational resources. So we have a Green Revolution curriculum. It was designed in out-of-school time space for after-school programs to be like the STEM piece for their after-school curricula, if you will. And so that's really been successful. We studied it. We wrote it 3 years ago, and we've been studying it every year in partnership with Harvard and the McLean Hospital.
Okay.
And so we've statistically improved our participants' STEM-related attitudes and their 21st century skills. So what that looks like is we're improving STEM career interests, STEM career knowledge, STEM interest, STEM enjoyment, problem solving, critical thinking, relationships with peers and adults, all these intangibles that corporations are saying that the ideal leader in their entities looks like, the type of skills that they need in relation to the STEM skills that are needed to do the job, but also the intangibles, those soft skills that helps us collaborate and make innovative solutions to real world problems. So it's been exciting to expand from a pilot of 15 students to now an initiative of 3 programs that serves 700 plus students every year.
And I like the fact that you're dealing with not only elementary school, you're also dealing with high school, you're also dealing with the community. And when we talk about the Morningside area, I know that area well. Morningside, Stop 6, Southside. And in understanding those areas, a lot of the grandparents and stuff like that have gardens. And for kids to know more about plants and planting and I call it urban farming. Some people are like, urban farming? Yeah, because, we always had one.
Yeah.
It makes it more understandable
Mm-hmm.
to the students. Now, you asked me a question the other day when we were talking on the phone.
Yeah.
What is your favorite thing about plants or the environment, or one of the things that you're just extremely passionate about?
I think it's it reflects like the very best in society. The environment has so many like um, benefits, that we as beneficiaries, receive from the environment. And sometimes we don't always give that back. And in a relationship, right, where you're taking, or someone's taking from you, but not pouring back into you, that's a one-sided relationship. And so the environment, doesn't walk out the door on us, right? It doesn't, hang up the phone on us. It's there. And so like, we get to teach so many wonderful life skills through what we call an environmental STEM platform. It's this idea of, looking at STEM through the lens of the environment. And so we get to teach about not only relationships with plants, with our water resources, but we also get to teach about relationships with others and how does working as a team to solve an issue in the environment, like developing a recycling initiative on a school campus. What does that look like, and how does those relationships with the environment mimic our relationships with our community, right? So, I think it's very interesting in the environment. You'll hear about, populations and communities of different species. And even in a social setting, there's environments in which we have to learn how to adapt, and there's environments in which we have to learn how to have some mutualism going on or some synergies between other folks. And so it's just a wonderful lens to look through to teach children in their formative years about some of the skills that will help, yes, with conserving our environment for future generations, but also will help build our society for future generations as well.
And that is so, so true, because, I've been blessed and lucky. The two schools that I taught at here in Fort Worth, we did have, I worked with the recycling programs and the environmental programs. The last high school that I worked at had very good environmental AP bio programs. And so, but all kids don't get, they don't get into those programs.
Right.
How do you motivate them to get
Right.
into them? I'm teaching chemistry, and I'm hearing this chirping in my class, just chirp, chirp, chirp. I'm like, what in the world is that? And, I had this kid, I'm just yelling at him, why are you chirping in the middle of my chemistry class? Looked over, the girl sitting across from him had a chicken in my chemistry class. I mean, it was, a chick, but it was not just a little chick. It was pretty good size. I'm like, what in the world? She goes, I wanted a chicken, and one of the other students bought her a chicken. I'm like, okay. You can't even argue with stuff like that. And this year I've been extremely lucky to work with a K-4 class here in Arlington. I've volunteered to do science projects
Thank you for what
with
you
them.
do. That's really important.
But you know what? I've always taught older kids.
Yeah.
I had so much fun with these kids and their teacher. I mean, we did things from growing plants. The teacher ordered a hatchery, and she went from eggs to chicks. The kids, come back over the weekend. The chicks were there, and then she gave them to a local farmer who wanted the chicks after they were born. But I'm like, to show that to 4-year-olds.
Yeah.
I mean, we did all kind of things with them that some kids don't get to do when they're in middle school or high school, because we're so focused on testing. So, to go from being in the classroom or go from being a principal to not have those restrictions to do things with kids, I mean, I had a blast.
Yeah.
So
like, you'd be surprised, like, how you can find, like, STEM connections and some of the smallest things. And then also, there's also neat opportunities to get, kids plugged into some other experiences like in a chemistry lab. And so one of the things that we've really strived to do is like develop a balance between like some of those 21st century skills that make like activities lighter, but then we also like weave it with like some really cool STEM concepts. So like for instance, one example, we partner with Hitachi Industries here just north of here in Grapevine or Irving. And they we partner with them to get a scanning electron microscope, and it's portable, which try to make a scanning electron microscope portable 30 years ago. It would have been the size of a room still.
Yep.
And so we now have a portable SEM, and I've had the privilege of, teaching kiddos as young as kindergarten how to use a SEM, right? And so from my experiences of never being in a lab, a science lab, until freshman year, and then see a kindergartner who's knows how to use a scanning electron microscope, at the age of 4 or 5. Is incredible, one, for the trajectory of that child's life, but even more so like just for mankind, for like kindergartners to be observing stomata at like 4 years old is absolutely incredible to me. So whether it's petting a chicken for the first time, walking in tall grass for the first time, or looking at something as sophisticated, if you will, as a SEM, all of those have the same like wow factor for kids, and they deserve each one of those experiences.
But the thing, it makes that connection. I mean, to use that microscope and look at a stomata and understand that's how a plant respirates, that's how it breathes, and you look on underneath the leaf, and you look on the top of the leaf and see which has the most. That makes a real life connection, instead of, ooh, this is a leaf. It breathes. It takes our carbon dioxide and gives us oxygen. But what does it do that through? And to be able to actually see it is a huge difference. It's making
really important.
It's making a life connection to it's taking that technology and making it relevant to a kid. And
be surprised how little coaching they need too when you put them in front of it. It's absolutely amazing.
I mean, when I did, I used the navy beans, and I soaked them, and I had my kids do navy bean dissections. These are 4-year-olds, and they put the coat, they tape the coat to one part of their paper, and then the food to one part of their paper, and then the sprout. And they went home, and their parents was like, our kids, what are you doing to our kids? Because you got our kids talking about this. But I mean, my heart just went to heaven when I asked a parent a couple of weeks ago, what are you and your son going to do build for the summer? And this father is a very handsy father. They're always doing something. He goes, we're building a roller coaster.
Oh, wow.
I was like, bam! I said, how big? He goes, it's about 6 feet long and about 3 feet tall. And I'm like, I mean, my heart just went, amazing. Wow. And this is a kid, well, he's 5 now, but I was like totally excited.
He'll be building a skyscraper in high school. Can't wait to see what he does.
But, what you're doing is it's just phenomenal. I've got a question here from Michonne. She wants to know, ask Jared about his leadership ISD experience. You must know her.
I know her from around the way.
Okay, I'm gonna have to tell you before you go. I'm gonna have to tell you how I met her, and she's gonna get on me. I was at work at the high school I was teaching at. And it was lunchtime, and my cell phone rings, right?
Yeah.
I answered the phone. It was a wrong number. It was her. And she goes, and we just started talking. I've never met her, and I've known her for about 6 years.
That's incredible.
And she was trying to find somebody to, she needed a orthopedic surgeon.
Yeah.
And I knew one, and so I gave her my orthopedic surgeon's number, and we have been in communications.
Michonne is an amazing soul.
Since.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, when I was in South Korea and my first book came out, I made sure I ordered it and sent it to her because, I mean, she is phenomenal and we've talked on the phone, but I've never physically met her. Maybe
She's
it will
awesome.
happen, you know, this year.
Maybe I can help that facilitate that process.
And Stephania Roberts, I don't know if you know her. She volunteers out at Britt, but she was saying that Mount Rose Missionary Baptist Church has a neighborhood planted a community garden. So you know.
Thank you for that. That's super important in connecting folks with where, food comes from. It doesn't come from the grocery stores, right? And so.
And that's a person you should go see. Stephania's garden.
I can't wait. I'm going to make that my mission.
She's registered with the state Botanical Society.
That's really awesome.
Yeah.
I can't wait to see it.
Okay. Now, tell us about your leadership experience with the ISD.
So I work this year. I worked very closely with a nonprofit called Leadership ISD. I was a part of their Civic Voices Fellowship.
Okay.
Leadership ISD is really focused on activating community stakeholders around what equity in education, public education looks like, and informing them, and then equipping them to make meaningful differences in their community around public education and around what is achieving student learning and outcomes looks like, and sometimes it looks differently depending on the child and the background. And so for example, our fellowship this year, we one of our practicums was to increase voter turnout in the local Fort Worth school board elections. And so they split us up into teams, and so I represent District 2, which represents communities and schools like Eastern Hills High School and Polytech. And we set out to, one, build our capacity, so we had to learn, what is public education, how does it work, and what are the opportunities to grow it. Secondly, we developed what we call local action networks of community stakeholders that have an investment in the success of students, which every person who lives in, city should have an invested interest in education, public education. And so we activated local action networks around helping us to get out the vote, and then empowering them to continue their network to hold school board members accountable, to provide partnerships for schools, and to provide connections with workforce and community into the schools for the students. And lastly, we helped to get out the vote through registration events. We registered over 100 students, high school students, to vote for the first time. We attended community events to increase voter awareness. And lastly, we were at the polls side by side with folks, patting them on their back for exercising their civic rights. And we can't say for certain that we were 100% causal of the results this year, but we certainly contributed to the 16.8% increase in voter turnout in a district that traditionally has a low voter turnout. And so that's the kind of work that Leadership ISD does, and it was really invaluable for me spending the last 7 years working in STEM equity, and then to have that extra piece of experience to be able to extend more opportunities to students, especially those traditionally not represented in the STEM fields. And so black and brown kids, women, and folks from low socioeconomic backgrounds. And so it was a really eye-opening experience to be able to take what we're doing as an initiative, focus on STEM, and then to scale it out to trying to solve public education, reform in Tarrant County. And then lastly, we worked with state policymakers. We went down to Austin for a 3-day trip and developed communication actions where you could text a number, and we had an email already generated for how you should advocate for increasing school finance so that each one of our children gets additional investment, or children's get each of our children get like additional dollars that they need for basic things in public schools. And so, through bombarding our, senators and representatives with emails about how we, believe that public school is important and why we should match that level of importance with additional funding per child is important. Texas is ranked at the bottom of all states for how much they spend per child in public schools.
Yeah.
And so we were able to see bills come through, and school finance reform was passed recently, which is the first time that lawmakers have touched education in terms of school funding in decades. And so that was a really monumental piece of work that I was fortunate to be a part of through this fellowship, and certainly will take it forward in new experiences and in continuing to do the work that we're doing with Britain, with Green Revolution.
Oh, now you have to let me know where I can come volunteer.
Absolutely.
Since I'm retired.
I'm all over the place volunteer. You could come right with me.
But I mean, that is phenomenal.
Yeah.
I mean, because you have to think. I'm going back to your the voting situation. We always see people on TV get out and vote, go register,
Sure.
but they never really. I've never ever heard of anyone focusing on that. 18, 19, 20-year-old high school student who can vote.
Now we're letting the secret out the bag.
Yeah. You have a say in what's going on.
So us registering 100 high school seniors was 5% of the voter turnout in 2015.
Wow.
Yeah.
That
So
is
if you do
excellent.
the numbers, right, if we had more bandwidth, which we're growing as a nonprofit, you would see that we could do this for schools across the county, and I think it's important to engage students immediately when they're able to vote legally, when they turn 17 and 3/4, right, that we help guide them to the polls and instill that importance early, right, and hopefully that experience will carry when they're on at college. Maybe they register at that town that they're going to school in, or if they're in the workforce, they can register in the town wherever they're working, or if they're in the military, they can do, a mail-in ballot, and so that civic responsibility to stay connected to the community by voicing our vote, and then also backing up our vote and our voice with action is really important. And I think, that's an untapped opportunity that I hope that, nonprofits like Leadership IC help to not only train the adults and the school board members and the policy makers, but also to give back and instilling the kinds of citizenship that we want to see 20, 30, 40 years down the road by starting with our children as well.
Because we've kind of lost that a little bit, because we're not in an era of any type of movement right now, like civil rights movement or women's voting movement. We're not in that era anymore. So some things have become a little bit overlooked, and that is like getting our youth out to vote.
Yeah, and life gets busy sometimes.
Oh my
right?
goodness!
Like,
don't even go there. Life gets real
on the
busy.
day, on the election day, one of my goals was to get to the polls, and at 7 a.m. that morning, we were taking 30 fifth and sixth grade students to Cleveland State Park to get on a kayak for the first time. And as soon as we finished that, I drove right to the polls, right? And so sometimes, voting and our civic engagement isn't convenient. But I guess that underlying driver for me and for folks all across the city is this idea that, the power of collective, right? That together, if we use what we can do, what our experiences are and our efforts, and we bring all those to the table together, we can make a difference. And, our kids are worth it. Our society is worth it. It's just worth it.
And you're not just voting for president or councilman, or you're also voting for things that are happening in your city.
Yeah.
environmental issues, transportation issues,
things that
school
affect you
bonds,
directly.
things that affect you directly.
And
now,
immediately.
Now, because we're coming up on 47 minutes after the hour. But
Time flies.
and so many people. Hey, Honey Bueno. Hey, Peggy. I give shout outs to people because Honey Bueno is down in San Antonio and she's joined us. But
Hello, Honey Bueno.
But and she's going to be on the show I think next month, and I'm excited
Awesome.
about her.
Can't
too.
wait to hear it.
But if a student or someone wants to come and get in one of your programs, how do they contact you? Where do they find out information? Where do parents find out information?
Absolutely.
And I usually ask this like 4 times, and we got to talking. I'm so sorry, my audience. I forgot.
So at BRIT, we have tons and tons of programs.
Yes.
Both student programs, family programs, and adult programs.
Teacher programs, because I went to several over there.
Yeah, so we have so many programs. I'll do a really quick, plug and rundown. So we have early childhood programs. We have our Seedling and Sprouts in the Gardens. It's a family program where you can bring your pre-K or pre-K
really?
3 or 4 or your toddler, and the program's really about getting kids' hands in some soil and exploring the outdoors and doing STEM at a very early age. We have our Bella programs. Bella goes, it's a early literacy program that is mostly in preschools around Fort Worth, but we also have Bella story times at BRIT on first Saturdays. So if you and your littles want to come and do a fun activity with the story combined, we do that.
Okay.
We have kindergarten through 5th grade, or really kindergarten through 12th grade field trips through our field study trip program, and so it's a really cool opportunity to explore what STEM careers look like. We have our Green Revolution initiative, and so for Green Revolution, right now we're partnered with Fort Worth ISD and Crowley ISD.
Okay.
But if your child does not attend one of those districts, I would love to meet the principal or the superintendent, and we'll develop a partnership to provide services. Then we have our teacher programs, as you mentioned. We have Teacher Tuesdays. So Teacher Tuesdays are really fun, and we always bring in wonderful speakers, and we give out CPE or
CTE credits.
Yes.
I know, because I got, back in the day, I got quite a few of them over at BRIT.
I always get that in education there's so many acronyms, but yeah, you can get professional learning credits for that. We also have our teacher boot camp. It's a 3-year experience that culminates on the 3rd year in Costa Rica, and it's
Can I volunteer for that one?
And the cost is I believe $300 for an individual educator. You don't have to be in the classroom, and $250 if you bring basically a colleague from your school or your district.
I'm going to have to make sure that gets out, because one of the districts called me today for some training.
Yeah.
But anyway, keep going.
And then the last program, we have adult and volunteer program. So if your child who's in high school, or if you want to volunteer for BRIT, you can volunteer in any one of our programs. And our adult education, we have classes, number of classes, botanical art classes, composting classes, all types of wonderful classes. And then lastly, if you're having a wedding or need meeting space, BRIT is also accommodating of that. So we have so many ways to engage the community, and we're looking to engage them in all of those ways. And if you're interested, our website is brit.org. If you want to go directly to our education programs, it's brit.org/grow. And then to get to Green Revolution's website, it's brit.org/gr. And all of our information, registration, links, and all that, all of those resources are available on our website. If you want to follow me personally on Instagram, I would love that. I post a lot about the opportunities in the gardens, and also a lot of opportunities in the city around STEM and around public education and equity. And so that's at Jared W PhD for Instagram and Twitter.
Oh, Jared W PhD. I'm so, you know what, man?
Tried to keep it simple.
I'm proud of you. I'm proud
8 letters
of
or less.
I'm proud of you. You're doing wonderful. Because we won't even talk about my Instagram. 'Cause my son came up with it, and it's like, okay, why do you have my age on my Instagram?
Angels don't age, though.
I know. Yeah, I tease people. I say we Southern women eat so much bacon, the oil just keeps our skin beautiful. But we've got about a minute left, but I want to ask you one more question.
Yeah, please.
What do you see for your future?
Lots of impact in the community. Lots of impact, and that's going to probably look a million different ways. But
yes,
my number one commitment is to see communities, Fort Worth and across the country, really thrive and have opportunities that reflect all of the citizens.
Yes.
Because we need everyone at the table in order to make this thing called, democracy work. So
yes.
Lots of things coming up soon.
Okay. Well, I love the fact that you're making the connections that you're making with, the relevance of technology with real world in STEM, and doing it in your favorite thing of botany, because you're making an impact. You're a young man making an impact, and you got to keep it up.
Thank you. We have lots of work to do.
Why do I have a feeling I've just got myself into something? But that's okay.
That's okay.
That's okay. All right. Hey, ladies and gentlemen, this is Dr. Mary Payton with All About STEM Radio. And don't forget, I am being sponsored by Britt Technical Institute out of Bedford, Texas. For more information on the career change into STEM, contact Ms. J.C. Newell at info@redwell-ed.org. And Cullen County Black Chamber of Commerce is giving their Supply Chain Entrepreneurship Academy June 17th through the 28th for high school juniors and seniors at UNT Frisco, and it is free. So until next week, thank y'all, and I'll see y'all then. Bye-bye.